comedy is a funny thing, literally and figuratively. When it comes to comedic style, British and American approaches couldn't be more different. British comedy tends to thrive on subtlety, misdirection, and clever manipulation of audience expectations. The classic formula involves leading the viewer down a path toward what feels like an inevitable, obvious conclusion, only to pull the rug out from under them with a sharp, unexpected twist. It's like being outwitted by a smug old uncle at a family gathering. By contrast, American comedy often leans heavily into immediacy and volume. The jokes come rapid fire, like a child who's just discovered the word poop and wants to share it with everyone in the room. It's less about building and subverting expectations, and more about pounding the punchline in so you don't miss it. Another way to think of it, British comedy is an old man poking fun at himself. American comedy is a child pointing out the obvious. Welcome to the Snake Pit, where we're full of bile and venom. I'm your host, Snake Daemon, and today we're diving into one of the crown jewels of British comedy, the Carry On series. Carry On is a British comedy franchise comprising 31 films, 4 Christmas specials, a television series, and multiple stage shows, all produced between 1958 and 1992. Produced by Peter Rogers and directed by Gerald Thomas, the franchise featured a recognizable and beloved ensemble cast, including legends like Sid James, Kenneth Williams, Charles Hawtrey, Joan Sims, Peter Butterworth, Hattie Jacques, Bernard Bresslaw, Barbara Windsor, Jack Douglas and Jim Dale. The humour of Carry On was, deeply rooted in traditional British comedic sensibilities, music hall antics, bawdy seaside postcard humour, and, an affection for lampooning institutions and social norms. The Carry On films hold a special place in cinematic history, comprising the largest number of entries for any British film series and standing as the second longest running franchise overall, second only to James Bond. That's right. More films than your average superhero universe ever will. Rogers and Thomas were the engines that kept the Carry On train moving, producing films on tight schedules and even tighter budgets. Yet despite the modest production circumstances, the crew, many of whom also moonlighted for the James Bond series, managed to create a distinct, timeless brand of comedy. Shot primarily at Pinewood Studios in Buckinghamshire, the films made creative use of the local countryside to double for far-flung exotic locations. Need the Khyber Pass? Just go to Snowdonia National Park. Need the Sahara Desert? Find a beach in Sussex and, squint really hard. The franchise kicked off with Carry On Sergeant back in 1958, a gentle comedy about national service recruits bumbling their way through military life. Its success really laid the groundwork for future installments like Carry On Nurse and Carry On Constable, establishing a pattern: take a respected profession or institution and expose it to the chaos of human incompetence. As the series evolved, so too did its boldness. By the mid-60s, the films were no longer just cheeky. They were gleefully naughty. Parodies became common, sending up genres like spy films with Carry On spying westerns, with Carry On cowboy horror movies, with Carry On screaming, and even biblical epics with Carry On Cleo. They famously scavenged the abandoned sets from the costly Cleopatra production, creating one of the best-loved entries in the series for just a fraction of the cost. The stock in trade of Carry On was innuendo, and honestly, loads of it. Characters were named with outrageous puns and double meanings. Take, for example, a character named Richard Turpin, known to everyone as Big Dick, thanks to the notable size of his weapon. No points for guessing the intended joke. Entire scenes could revolve around the hunt for a birthmark, on that weapon no less. Subtlety was not part of the package. The humour pushed boundaries as far as British censors would allow, and sometimes a little beyond. Amazingly, despite all the cheekiness, most Carry On films were rated PG in the UK. Yes, you hear that right. You could have a movie about camping that opens with a full documentary-style sequence featuring nudity, and yet it sits right next to Frozen in the PG category. You can't make this shit up. Only 2 films, Carry On England and Carry On Emmanuel, received stricter ratings due to their heavier sexual content. But by then, the franchise was showing its age, awkwardly trying to compete with the more explicit, less charming sex comedies of the late 70s. Honestly, I can't not talk about Carry On without mentioning the links it has to Doctor Who, and no, it's not just one or two. There are quite a few crossovers that fans of both series will appreciate. Peter Butterworth, one of the Carry On regulars, famously played the mischievous, meddling monk opposite William Hartnell's Doctor, and he appeared more than once. Bernard Bresslaw, better known for towering over his castmates and bumbling around in Carry On, took a more menacing turn as the Ice Warrior Varga in The Ice Warriors. Angela Douglas, who charmed audiences in several Carry On films, showed up as Doris, the long-suffering wife of the Brigadier in Battlefield alongside the Seventh Doctor. Joan Sims, another staple of the series, met a grim fate in the mysterious planet, executed by the robot Drathro during the trial of a Time Lord season. Even Leslie Phillips, though not as tied to Carry On as others, joined the Doctor Who pantheon later, voicing Dr. Knox in Big Finish audio stories. And it wasn't just a one-way street. There was crossover in the reverse direction too. William Hartnell himself appeared in Carry On Sergeant as the stern but good-hearted Sergeant Grimshaw, an ironically perfect role for the original Doctor. John Pertwee, the beloved Third Doctor, made no fewer than 4 appearances across the Carry On films, although fans might prefer to forget his part in the much-maligned Carry On Columbus. So, in a weird way, Carry On and Doctor Who were part of the same chaotic, joyful British entertainment universe, both sharing cast, crew, and that wonderfully irreverent spirit that, really defined a golden age of television and film. Financially, the Carry On films were miracles of cheapness. Principal actors received about £5,000 per film, an amount Kenneth Williams often lamented in his diaries. Despite his criticisms, Williams remained loyal, knowing that the series and his unique performances brought joy to millions. Peter Rogers, ever the pragmatist, understood that while actors like Williams cost him very little, they brought in a very healthy return at the box office. The film's cheeky irreverence often came under critical fire, but audiences didn't care. Carry On was for the people, not the critics, and in 2007, the iconic line from Carry On Cleo, "Infamy, infamy, they've all got it in for me," was voted the funniest movie one-liner in film history. Not bad for a line originally lifted from a radio show. The franchise stumbled towards the end. Attempts at reviving the magic, like Carry On Again Nurse and Carry On London, fizzled out, killed by actor deaths, budget problems, and an increasingly different cultural landscape. There were rumblings of a Carry On reboot even into the 2010s, but with today's hypersensitive audiences, the odds of a successful return are virtually zero. And let's be blunt. The Carry On humour was deeply rooted in a particular kind of boundary-pushing double entendre. If you tried that today, you'd have a Twitter mob demanding public apologies before the first camera even rolled. Could you imagine a modern audience handling jokes about a man nicknamed Big Dick because of his flintlock? Or scenes where entire gags hinge on mistaking body parts for something else entirely? Today's entertainment industry couldn't stomach a fraction of the Carry On spirit, and frankly, it would strip the heart right out of it. The Carry On films are a product of their time, a time when British comedy could gleefully poke fun at authority institutions and itself without 1,000 think pieces being written about it the next day. They were cheeky without being nasty naughty, without being mean-spirited, and most importantly, funny without constantly apologising for it. They celebrated absurdity, revelled in human folly, and didn't take themselves seriously for a single second, and maybe that's why, even now, they still manage to make people laugh. If Hollywood or modern British film ever dares to try again, they'd better bring a thick skin of sharp wit, and the understanding that not everything needs to be sanitized into a bland, lifeless husk for the sake of modern audiences. Otherwise, better to leave Carry On where it belongs, a glorious, chaotic, hilarious relic of a time when comedy still had teeth. Thanks for dropping by the Snake Pit, where we thrive on untapped potential and lost opportunities. Don't forget to subscribe and hit that bell like the video, and leave your opinions in the comments, where naturally I won't read them. Until next time, stay venomous.